Good day, YouTube friends. So, like any good day, you should start off with a good breakfast, right? So, today I'm just making some eggs and big red smokies here, which I really like. And last year we had a terrible drought, followed by some really cold weather here around the holidays. And this is what happened to my boxwood plant. And this was a massive, my favorite boxwood, and it is half dead. And they're like that all over town right now. But my house also needs to be power washed, you can see. I need mulch and all kinds of landscaping, I know. That's why I'm doing this, and actually it's a long project, so maybe by next year I'll plant some new boxwoods and mulch and get my house power washed sometime and get the front of it looking better. But that's a whole other story. So half of this boxwood died, and I'm just going to go ahead and take some cuttings off of it, off of this new growth. It's spring, it's May right now, the first week of May, and all this new growth is shooting up. Now, I haven't cloned boxwood ever before, but I have everything I need to do it. I mean, I have the rooting hormone and this bush right here. I don't know if it has any type of disease. I don't know if this is any type of blight or disease or anything that's killing it. It was a big, healthy plant for years. I mean, it's almost 6 feet tall, and I hated to lose it, but whatever happened, I didn't water last year during that drought, and I guess it probably got really dry, is what I'm thinking. But they're dead all over town. If you look around town, there's boxwoods that are dead all over the place. So, I have not done this before, but you can see all those new little twigs sticking up, the new growth. And I'm just kind of looking for the healthiest new growth that doesn't have any signs of disease or anything on it. And I'm just going around and clipping off as much as I can to try to find some good cuttings. Now, like I said, I have never done boxwood before, so this is a total experiment. You're welcome to follow along. I'll probably do some updates later in the year, and I'm hoping to get them in the ground next year. I don't know what I'm going to do with them over the winter time right now. I'm hoping that they root relatively quick in the next few weeks, and then I can maybe put them in like plastic red solo cups individually and let them live throughout the rest of the year. And then this winter, I don't know what I'm going to do yet. I'm going to research and figure it out, whether I put them in the garage with a light, or I leave them outside, or where I put them by a window and bring them inside. I don't know what I'm going to do yet. But anyways, we'll figure that out as we go. And that's pretty much all that's going on here. I'm going to have to cut this bush out soon and kill it and throw it away. It just looks terrible. It's half dead. It's not coming back. So it's going to get cut down. But I'm going to finish taking these cuttings here, and we'll move on to the next step. But because I have to cut this thing down, at least hopefully it's going to give life to a new generation of boxwoods. And I really only got about 15 or so cuttings, but that should be a pretty good amount. I mean, if I can get 10 or 15 of them to live, that's enough to make a nice little new line of hedges in front of my house, and then this bush will, be able to continue its legacy, hopefully. Now, like I said, I haven't done this before, so this new growth I noticed after I cut it all, the stems are not woody yet, and I think you need to kind of get them to where they're a little bit hard and hardened off and woody a little bit. So I did the best I could with the ones that were a little bit larger. I trimmed them down to the base and got the woody stems. And here I'm just showing that I cleaned my scissors with alcohol and a paper towel just to make an attempt to have disease-free cuts or whatever. So I just kind of wipe these scissors down, and I don't wipe it down between every cutting or anything. I just did it before I started cutting, and then Now I'm going to start with the arborvitaes. I have these beautiful arborvitae trees that I planted as clones. They were tiny, when like talking like 3 to 5 inches when I bought them. I bought 50 of them for like whatever, $15 or whatever it was. I don't know. It was so long ago, but that's what they look like now. They're gorgeous. And I'm also going to take a bunch of cuttings off of these, and I ended up having way more of these cuttings than I did of the boxwood. But that's why I was cleaning my scissors, because I cut all the boxwood, and I had clean scissors when I started. And then I cleaned my scissors just in case those boxwoods had any type of blight or fungus or something that's killing that bush. I just cleaned my scissors off, and then I did my arborvitae separate with clean scissors. But this is just showing me cutting all the cuttings off of the arborvitae tree. Same deal. Just looking for some new growth with nice little clones on it that you can take cuttings off of. And again, I think you need to kind of find the stem. When you're working with trees like this, I think the stem needs to be kind of hardened off and woody. I'm not sure how many of these arborvitaes are going to make it, because some of them the stem was still like new growth and it's just real green and limber and flexible. So on a lot of the cuttings, well, on as many as I could, I tried to get the thicker, hardened off, woody stems. I'm not sure I was able to accomplish that on all of them though, so this is an experiment. I don't know what's going to happen. Again, I'll probably do an update. I'll let you know later in the year as time goes on. And if the green cuttings don't make it, then we'll all live and learn. I'm sure some of them will make it, but it'll be a learning experience, and we'll just check it out as the year goes on and see what I'm left with. So here I'm just kind of showing you guys what a typical cutting looks like. I mean, I cut the end of that branch off, and then there on the right would be like a cutting. You can see how the stem is still kind of green and flexible, but that's what I'm using. This is the rooting hormone I use. It's just Miracle-Gro Fast Root, and I'll post a link to that in the description, and I'll try to post a link to any other supplies that I'm using in the description. Appreciate it if you would use the links. I need to be using my Amazon Associates account. But that rooting hormone so far, I've used it for several types of plants, and it has been great. I mean, I know it's a Miracle-Gro product. Some people don't like the major brands. I think it's a great price, and it's readily available, so I don't have a problem with it at all. It has provided vigorous root growth on everything I've used it on, and the difference is massive. I mean, if you look at something with no rooting hormone versus rooting hormone, it's hands down, I mean, there's no comparison. I mean, when you don't use rooting hormones, yes, it will work, but you'll just kind of end up with a few roots here and there and smaller roots. And when you use hormones, it's like the stem is just coated in big, thick, white, healthy roots all the way around, you know, everywhere that stuff touches. And that just translates into a much healthier plant slash tree. I mean, if you start off with, you know, dozens of roots just pumping water and nutrients into the stem, I'm sure you could imagine that it's a big difference than just having like, you know, 2 or 3 roots that happen to come out of, you know, the prime spots where there's, you know, like the tip of the stem where it was cut and there's a crack and you get a root, you know, kind of shooting out there a little bit, and then somewhere else is another one. It just makes a big difference on the plant growth and the vigor and health of your next generation to have, you know, really healthy roots all over the stem. So use rooting hormone, it really helps. And here I'm throwing in a few handfuls of peat moss into my Fox Farm potting soil. And I don't know, I've had this peat moss forever. Look how dry it is. I mean, it's just turning to dust. And I kind of wish I wouldn't have put the peat moss in, because as soon as I grabbed a handful and threw it in, I noticed that there was a bunch of sunflower seeds from all of the local bird feeders around. So like little birds have been getting in that bag and eating sunflower seeds and stuff. So I might have to do some weeding in the pots, but that won't be a big deal. I mean, it's just one little small pot, so I can pull out a few weeds if they come up. But also, if you've ever worked with peat moss, it is like really dry, at least the kind that I've had. Um, it doesn't want to take water for like, it takes days of soaking for it to slowly just start to, it's like water off a duck's back. I mean, peat moss, it does not absorb the water until it has time. I mean, once it spends a week or two in the ground and it's wet and wet and wet, it'll finally become absorbent like a sponge. But when you first put it in, it just does not take the water. So I kind of wish I wouldn't have put it in. For some reason, I thought it would just kind of help to bulk up the soil and build the soil and add a little more variety. And I don't think it'll be a big deal. It's gonna work still, I think, but I don't really think I should have done that for both reasons. One, the water, and the weed issue. So, anyways, I did a little mix there of peat moss and Fox Farm potting soil that's been in my garage for several years. Um, but that Fox Farm soil is pretty good. It's got a lot of nutrients in it, and it'll be fine for this purpose for sure. And that's what that looks like. And now I go ahead and throw some water into this soil and try to get it soaking, especially for the peat moss because, like I said, it does not want to take water. It like repels water. I mean, it just doesn't soak it up. You pour it in, and the peat moss just starts floating up on top of the pot, and the water goes down underneath. But I try to go ahead and get it wet so it would maybe soak in for a little while I'm doing my cuttings, and everything will be, just kind of moist and ready for the cuttings. The peat moss is still not ready. It takes a couple weeks of being outside in the weather before that stuff gets wet. But in a minute I take a spray bottle and mist it real good, and I find that helps too when you're trying to do cuttings and potting fresh plants and things. A spray bottle with a mister is really good to have handy because it's gentle on the top soil, on the top layer of the soil, and you can mist the whole soil, and it adds a real even coat and gets everything even without blasting the new plants. I mean, like, my watering can, the spout broke off of it. I don't remember how I did it, but I broke my watering can several years ago, and I'm going to fix that in a minute and show you how to fix it. But with no spout especially, or if you were to just take a hose under pressure and just put a hose in that potting soil with it running on full blast, your cuttings would just get blasted out of the soil. I mean, it would just blow soil all over the place and pound water down into the soil. And I mean, I'm sure you can see what I'm talking about or imagine what I'm talking about here. It just ruins the whole thing. So a spray bottle really helps to mist them and get a nice even coat of moisture into the top layer of the soil. Now, that doesn't really get in there as much as you think it does. I mean, you really have to saturate it. So don't walk away and think that you're done, but it's a good way to get it all compacted and a little more heavy, and then that way you can come in with a little bit heavier water and get it to soak in down underneath the top layer. Spray bottle also is good for cleaning the plants too. Now I'm just making all my cuttings, and again, I have never really done this with these type of plants before, so I do it several different ways. I mean, some of these stems, like I said earlier, are kind of green and not hardened off real well. Um, I tried to trim the tops of some of them off, so it's like you have the main shoot, like what would be the apical meristem of the plant or whatever. Some of them I left the apical meristem, and others I trimmed the main shoot off. I trimmed some of the lower branches off so there would be a nice inch or two portion of stem going into the ground, and I kind of just trimmed off the tips of some of the branches. Some of them I left, if they were small and just kind of perfectly situated, I left them intact and just kind of stuck them in the soil. We'll just have to see what happens as the year goes on. I'm sure most of them will make it, but maybe some won't. We'll see. So I have my spray bottle now, and I just missed the cuttings down. Um, I'm doing that so that when I put them in the rooting hormone will stick to them, because when they're dry, it just doesn't. But yeah, get a little bit of water on the stem and dip it in the rooting hormone, and then that powder just really sticks to them really well, and it probably helps to kind of get it dissolved and into the stem immediately too. So that's what I'm doing there, and then I just kind of go through and dip every one, trim it up real good on the stem, and stick it right into the soil. I also wanted to mention too that while I am trimming the main shoot on some of them and also some of the side branches, you know, the apical meristem tips off of the branches, some I don't trim, but I don't know if it really matters too much. I mean, you certainly can leave too much bulk on a cutting. I mean, if it's too large and there's too much bulk going everywhere, then it's just really hard for it to sustain itself with no roots. So it's almost better, less is more sometimes, when you consider um, that fact that it needs to sustain itself. So if it has a ton of shoots, and that's why you can't take a really large cutting, because it just gets to the point where it can't take up enough through its stem to keep going. But my point here is also that even if you don't trim them and you have a small cutting maybe and you leave it intact, so to speak, and just put the stem right in the soil, after it's rooted and it starts growing, you can then come back later and do your trimming and get it to bush out. So you can cut it now, and then that way when it roots and starts to grow, it'll already be kind of starting to bush and get more side branching. Or if you waited and went ahead and let it root and it was thin and kind of spindly when it started growing, you could go ahead and trim it right away then, and then it would start bushing out. So I think either way works. It's just a matter of preference, and it's kind of also a matter of the individual piece of plant matter that you're working with, what is best for that individual cutting. So this is what the pots look like, and I don't know how I'm going to get those out of there. I'm just going to worry about it later. Once they're rooted, it's a lot easier to deal with them. I mean, they're not as fragile as you think they are, and I mean, if you let them go pretty long, that whole thing will just be into a matted root ball. So you could probably just grab them and pull them up, and that whole thing will come up as a root ball. Um, Now that little pot on the right where I put my boxwoods, it has a big crack in it, and it's just a piece of junk anyways. So that pot I can just break in half, and you know it'll just be a root ball. But I'll worry about that later, how I get them out of there. I can take a small little gardening spade shovel and dig them out, or just get my hands down in there and lift the whole root ball out and then just break them up. But hopefully what I'll do is I'll let them go to the point where they're rooted really well and strong, but not overly tangled. And if I can kind of nail that somehow, which is going to be difficult because I've never done this before and I can't see the root ball through those ceramic pots. But if I can just kind of get them to the point where they're strong but not overly root bound, then I'll just lift them out of there and separate them and then put them into like plastic cups or something for the rest of their growing period. And now it's time to clean the scissors and move on to the boxwood. So here we go. It's basically just the same process with the boxwoods. They're just shaped a little bit differently. The new growth just comes up in like single little branches with leaves on them. So I just strip back some of the leaves on the bottom of the stems. I look for the ones that are kind of more hardened than the green new growth, and just put them in the rooting hormone and then straight into the soil. My only regret is I kind of would like to have done more of them, but I think I got about 15, and there really wasn't a lot more new healthy shoots on that bush left. I mean, I'm sure there's some, but 15 should be enough. If I can get a good 10 survivors or more, that should be enough plants. So we'll see what happens. Now I'm going to give you guys a close-up of what one of these little cuttings looks like, and you can see how the top of that is new growth and it's real supple. And right there I saw a node where you can see there's 2 leaves coming out of that node and then the main shoot. I just picked that main shoot off that's real supple and fragile looking, and then the bottom of that on the left is a lot more woody and hard. So I plant that one, and that'll be a nice double shoot coming up. And I may have went ahead and planted the top of it too, just to see what happens. So yeah, I go ahead and do the top of that too. That one may not make it. I mean, maybe it will, I don't know, but that's what I'm doing, and that gives you kind of a look at what is going on. But I think that one that was on the left is going to be like what you would prefer to take. And again, I know we talked about this before, but this is all I had for pots or trays right now that I could really use easily. I think it would be preferable to use like a seedling tray and have them separated a little bit better. But this is what I had, and I didn't want to ruin a perfectly good like Tupperware container and drill holes in it and do this with all of this, because I mean I needed a lot of them anyways. But this is what they look like, and I'll worry about getting them out of there later and trying to separate them. But if this works, it also just kind of goes to show the simplicity of it all. I mean, if this works and I'm able to get them out, then it's just like, if I can do it, you can do it. You know, just put them in a pot with some soil, use some rooting hormone, and it'll work. But here, I am using these old splash blocks or extra splash blocks because if anyone that's ever done gardening knows that if you set those pots on your patio and just leave them in the weather, they will ruin your patio. I mean, even if you put them with a tray underneath them, if you don't stay on top of it, those trays will overflow and fill up with rain, and all of that dirt and everything just runs out of the pots and stains your patio. I had to power wash that entire patio because I left pots sitting on it, and all of that black potting soil just leaked all over the entire portion of that exposed aggregate and turned it black. So it will stain, and this is what I'm doing to try to prevent that. I put them on splash blocks right on the edge, and here in a minute I put little pieces of wood underneath them to kind of prop them up and angle it so the water will run out and away from my patio. But hopefully that works, and I'm just going to let them sit here for the year and try to keep them moist. That's going to be my next challenge. Is this garden project is going to have to be watched after, and we get really dry in July, August. It's hot and it's dry, and if I don't stay on top of these things, they will die. So I don't want them to fry. And this is my project for the year. I mean, I don't have good luck with vegetables because of what I just said. They just don't do well in my backyard and pots right here. There's a lot of stink bugs and aphids, and it gets really dry and hot, and you have to stay on it like constantly. And I don't like using pesticides on my food, and it burns the plants. And there goes one of my pots. So I'm going to show it all here, but when I prop this thing up, that pot fell over. So now I have to go back and replant all of these cuttings in that pot that just dumped over. Oh well, that's getting ready to happen. Okay, I'm going to speed this up again while I replant all of these, but this is where the spray bottle comes in handy. Again, it's really good for cleaning plants off. So these plants have dirt all over them now, and I just take that spray bottle and hold them upside down and spray them off, and then I put a little bit more rooting hormone back on them again and just repot them. So it's not a big deal. This is what we're looking like, and somehow I ended up with a ton of arborvitaes and one little bucket of boxwoods. And I gotta be honest, the boxwood is the main reason I'm doing this. So that's what I was saying. I wish I had more of them, but 10 or 15 should be enough. Now on to my watering can. I broke this thing off. I think I dropped it on the ground several years ago, but I saved the tip. And if you're a watering can user, you know how great it is to have a diffuser on the end so the water doesn't, again, just blast your pots. But to do this job, I use a plastic welder. That's what that thing is in my hand, and I'm going to weld this thing back on. You could also do this with a heat gun and a screwdriver. And just heat it up and heat the screwdriver up red hot and press it in and just kind of mold the plastic around. But I was able to use this welder, and it does, I think I got it good enough. It's watertight and it's on there, and it's just a watering can, so it's good enough for me. If it ends up breaking later this year or in the future, I can come back and do a better job. But honestly, this was pretty good. It feels really solid, and it's not leaking, and that plastic was starting to get thin. So I didn't want to over melt it and cause it to if it gets too thin, it'll just fall apart and you'll have a hole and a big mess and everything else. And not that that's not repairable, but I had it to the point where it was attached and it was solid and it wasn't leaking. So that's good enough for me. It's kind of just like stop right there, don't go any further. If I do drop it or bump it into something and it breaks in the future, like I said, I can do a better repair on it. And I mean, there's more to plastic welding than just this. You can add plastic to it and get a better seal and bulk it up and everything. I can do that in the future if I want, but right now, like I said, it's fine, it's working, it's watertight, it's solid, so I'm good with it. Check it out. You can hear me breathing. This stuff is not as easy to do as it looks on camera. I right now am standing up and holding this in view of the camera while also repairing it. And it's kind of an awkward position because you can't see it, but the tripod is in between me and what I'm repairing. So I'm standing up with my legs kind of with the tripod, straddling the tripod and reaching in front while holding this thing up right in front of the lens of a camera. And it just kind of takes some coordination and some focus. But yeah, I got it stuck on with the heat gun, and it just kind of stuck there. And then I just come back with the plastic welder and go around the seam and just kind of seal it up here. I guess now would be a good time to say that you should wear gloves when you're doing this, preferably like thick, heavy leather gloves, but mechanic gloves will work because it never ceases to amaze me. There's always somebody out there on YouTube that'll come in and say, you need to be wearing safety equipment or whatever. I mean, give it up, people. I don't know. I mean, I guess there's always going to be somebody that is sitting at home that has some critique or whatever, but it's not just me. I mean, I was reading somebody else's comments on their page, and this guy that I found, I'm sorry, I don't know his name right now. I subscribe to his channel, but he makes these beautiful live oak or live edge slab tables and stuff out of trees. And he was using his chainsaw one day, and this guy in his comments just ripped him a new one, going, just because you can start a chainsaw doesn't mean you should be running one. You have no idea what you're doing, you idiot, and all that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't. This guy is that's so mean, and the guy was just doing a bore cut on a tree to make a live edge slab. And like, I don't even know if this guy knows, the guy in the comments knows what a bore cut is, because that's what you do. I mean, you take the tip of your saw and bore it into the trunk of the tree, and that's just how it goes. I mean, sometimes you get a little bit of kickback when that happens. But yeah, try to keep the comments positive, and it's like, yeah, I know I don't have gloves on, idiot. Um, so whatever, but thanks for all the people that have something nice to say, or if they do have questions or whatever, can phrase them in a way that doesn't come across as completely condescending and rude. And anybody out there that's a creator that knows what I'm talking about, I feel your pain, and I'm sorry that you have to go through that. And I always try to be positive towards other people. But back to the video. I got this thing reattached, and I know it's not like real pretty, but it's actually solid. And like I said, I got it to a point where I was like, man, this is solid and it's not leaking, and I'm just gonna go with that. It's a watering can. You know, I really don't care how it looks cosmetically. I mean, if you wanted to come in and bulk all that plastic up and smooth it out real good and sand it down and spray paint it, whatever, you can. I'm not doing it. It works. So here we go with my new watering can, and you can see it works just fine. I'm totally fine that it's kind of, you know, misshapen or whatever. I'm thrilled to have that thing back reattached because my watering can was broken. So I'm just happy to have it working again, and I got a diffuser now, and I can use it on my plants this summer. And hopefully I keep these things alive. So that watering can is going to get quite a bit of use this year. I'm going to try not to slack off on the watering, because when it comes July, August, and you've been doing this, you know, several times a week for months, you kind of slack off sometimes. So we'll see, and hopefully they make them through the summer, and I'll figure out what to do over the winter with these things and get them in the ground next year. So speaking of comments, if anybody has been through this or knows what I should do this winter with these things, let me know in the comments. Should I put them by a window in my house? I'm not really thrilled about that, because one, I have a cat that could get into them, and two, I don't know if any type of, you know, fungus gnats or bugs or anything will get into them. You know, I just don't want to risk bringing anything into the house. So that's not the ideal thing, but I mean, I could put them in the garage also and just put like some fluorescent lights or something on a timer over them, if I can find space for that. I could put them in, I mean, I don't know. Or do you just leave them outside? I mean, if they get rooted here in the next few weeks and they have all summer and fall to kind of grow a little bit, maybe they'll just be fine in the pot sitting outside, and they'll get used to their natural new weather environment. I don't know. So if you have any input into that, let me know in the comments, please, and I'd be glad to know, because I'm going to have to figure that out later this year. So now, because that peat moss is so dry, and because they're going to be a little bit fragile, I go ahead and cover them up, and this kind of stuff works great. I mean, like, a lot of people think cloning is really difficult and you got to go spend a bunch of money on all these humidity domes and everything. There's all kinds of ways to accomplish this without spending a lot of money. So like right now, I'm just going to use some plastic wrap. This is Glad wrap, whatever. There's also cling wrap, which is sticky and it's transparent. I have a really hard time getting this to stick to these pots, because you can't tell, but there's like peat moss dust all over the side of the pots, and it's not sticking to the ceramic. So I have to come back with some tape, and the wind is blowing, and I actually kind of start getting really frustrated dealing with this saran wrap and the wind. But I just power through it and refuse to give up, and I end up using some masking tape just to tape it down. And so far it works really well. It's holding in the moisture. Within a matter of minutes, you'll see that the saran wrap becomes translucent with water droplets on it. But I'm at least going to leave this on maybe for a few days and let that peat moss hopefully soak in some moisture. Maybe that'll help the soil to stay moist. And I'm just going to watch them. I mean, you certainly don't want any mold or anything to develop, but I'm going to leave this on as long as possible, and that'll help hold in the moisture and get them rooted and get the soil nice and moist and hold it in. And then I won't have to be out there, watering constantly either. So I'm going to leave this plastic on for as long as I can without getting any mold problems or anything. Maybe it'll be on for a couple weeks. I don't know. Um, and I can also just kind of peel it up and put some more water in if I need to. But this is going to kind of help them get started and help them to stay moist, and kind of like you can use an anti-transparent spray, but I don't like anti-transparents because, again, it's just a chemical that you introduce into your system that's not necessary. If you use a humidity dome of some type, the plants will stand up on their own, and it keeps the leaves from shedding out too much moisture through transpiration, and everything just stands up towards the sun, and it works completely natural without adding excess chemicals. So I really prefer this method, and I'm just going to keep an eye on it and see how it does. Here you can see that I'm not even done putting the plastic on yet, and there's already condensation building up on the plastic. With the boxwoods, I put a little piece of cedar in the middle to stake it up like a little tent, because I don't know, it's hard to tell from the video maybe, but the boxwoods stand up a little bit taller in that little pot, so I couldn't really just flatten them off and cut them off on top, so I gave them a little dome there. Well, now that project is done, and you can see how much water they've trapped already in like 10 minutes. And I'll just keep an eye on that and make sure they don't get too wet. But I don't think it'll hurt for at least a few days to do that. And now we're going to move on to this next project. On the ground here right near my backyard, there's all kinds of little maple seedlings coming in. They're all over the ground. And since we've been cutting up so many trees, let's try to give a few of them a chance and plant some trees, right? And so I just came through here and just kind of picked out 2 little trees that I liked. And I'm going to take these and pot them up and give them a good chance at living. And I don't know what I'm going to do with them yet right now. I mean, I could make them into bonsai trees. I think Japanese maples are a little bit better for bonsai, but I could also just kind of grow them for a couple years and then plant them around my house once they get healthy and a few feet tall. I could grow them. I have a really large pot. I could put one of them in a massive pot and have like a patio tree for a while. I don't know, but I just thought I would take a couple of these seedlings and give them a really good shot at life here. Hopefully I don't kill them. But yeah, I just dig them up with a sharpshooter shovel, and I'm gonna pot those up here. And I just used, again, I used Fox Farm potting soil. Hopefully that doesn't hurt them. I don't think it should. I didn't check the pH of the soil that they're in, and then check the pH of the soil that I'm putting them in and try to match it or use lime or anything. I mean, I just used, potting soil that's nutrient rich, and it's been sitting in my garage a long time, but it should still have some life. It certainly is probably better than the forest floor, I would imagine, with clay and no fertilizer. But that's what I'm going to do. And while we're on the subject of bonsai, you guys got to check this guy's YouTube channel out. He's a bonsai master. His name is Herons Bonsai. It's Herons Bonsai. and he's located in London. I wish he was in the States because I would love to visit or be able to ship some of his stuff. But I mean, I just found his channel the other day, and I want to watch all kinds of videos he has. Some of his maples and things are just amazing, and they're bonsais of all different sizes. I mean, like, he has maples that are 20 or 30 years old that are only a few feet tall, but they're just massive trunks and with just cool looking little trees. And he has maples that are 20 years old that he allowed to get a little bit bigger that are, 8 or 10 feet tall, but they're also somewhat kind of bonsai looking. They're decorative and real fancy looking. But he has all kinds of bonsai on his channel of all different kinds of trees, and he has all kinds of instructions and things. So if you're into that or you'd like to see it, I would go check him out. And there's our little maple trees. I don't know what I'm going to do with them. I'm just going to let them grow for a year or two, see how they do. But that's going to wrap up this video. Thanks a lot for watching, and plant a tree. Have a good day.